2.
Good day, everyone. It's Alan Schemmel from Techstrong. Welcome to another in our series of PeopleCert Skill Up sessions, powered by Techstrong Learning. This is a series of learning sessions, skill up sessions that we've been doing in partnership with our friends at PeopleCert and formerly DevOps Institute on various topics regarding DevOps, service management, project management. I want to thank you for joining us. This is going to be about 55 minutes or so. And before I introduce the topic and our participants, let me just get some housekeeping out of the way. I know many of you, when you registered, you saw the pictures, and Sharon Florentine was supposed to be our moderator today. Unfortunately, Sharon came down with a medical condition yesterday, and which prevents her from being on with us today. So we apologize for that, and wish Sharon a speedy recovery. And she'll be back to herself moderating these very, very shortly. For those who are not familiar, we use the Big Marker webinar or event platform for these events. And what we like about it is you play it right in your browser. There's no plugin to download, no app to download or anything like that. It just plays. The other thing that I personally think it's great about is the communication capability. And that's for our audience, not just for our members, panel members. So let me point that out to you. For most of you, that's in the right-hand corner of your web browser. And you'll see up top, it'll say chat, QA, perhaps polls and handouts. And then, so those are your main categories. Underneath each of those categories are subcategories. So for instance, in chat, you have chat, and then underneath that, there's public and private and Twitter. We don't really use the Twitter section. You're not going to tweet from here directly to, well, formerly Twitter. Now I guess we call it X. But if you want to raise a question, though, that everyone can see, and anyone in the audience or on the panel is welcome to chime in on, use the chat public board for that, and you'll see it pop in there. And I see many of you have already logged in, telling us where you're from, and we appreciate that. For as long as I've been on the internet, and I've been on the internet a long time, I still get a kick out of seeing just truly how global the internet is, and how it makes us one community. So just looking, we have people from Canada to Colombia to Virginia. What's interesting is at this time of day, we try to aim more for an EMEA audience of Europe and Middle East and Africa. And our panelists today are from EMEA. But anyway, it makes no difference where you're from. We're happy to have you here. I would also so feel free to use the public chat to communicate. If you have a specific question, though, that you really want our panelists to look at, I would point you over to the Q&A category, and you could go in there and you could type your question in there. That'll come to me here as the moderator, and I will do my best to bring it up with the panel, and we will do our best to try to answer that for you. So again, welcome. Make good use of that. I want to draw out one other area or one other category in the communications, and that is the one marked handouts. One of our panel members, Ad Sator, was nice enough to prepare some slides that we'll be looking at today. This is not a slideshow. I don't want to scare anyone away. We're going to have a good discussion. But Ad has prepared some slides which I think will help ground us and allow you to follow along. So that's where we are. And if you go to handouts, I believe you can download a PDF of Ad's slides right from there. So feel free to do so you'll have them, you'll be able to have them forever. They're yours to keep. So feel free to do that. All right. with that out of the way, today's skill up session is how far left should continuous testing be shifted? We shift left for those in the DevOps space, tech, security, DevSecOps. The concept of shift left is not new. We've been talking about shift left now probably for 7-8 years. But if there is anyone out there who's not sure or not familiar, what we're talking about is if you look at the software development lifecycle, right? And then, like, as we read a book from left to right, it starts at that far left, maybe with the planning, architecturing, and so forth. And then the life cycle goes left to right, like a timeline. And, certain things happen at certain junctions of that timeline. And, in modern DevOps, we have the concept of pipeline, right? And as we look as software moves through that pipeline from left to right, what we're talking about is shifting certain functionality further left. So it happens earlier in the life cycle. Now, an interesting kind of development of that shift left and, movement is that generally the more we shift left, the more developers the developer has to do. So when we talk about shifting testing, shifting left, are we asking the developer to do that test? Maybe. We're going to explore that today. Let me introduce you quickly to our panelists and ask them to tell you a little bit about themselves. First up, I want to introduce you to Powell. I had it and I lost it. Powell Piwas.
Piwas. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. And
Powell, give the audience a little bit of information about yourself.
So, hello everyone. I'm really happy to see so many of you here. And my name is Paweł. I'm based in Poland, in Krakow. Right now, I am developer advocate. So I changed a little bit my focus, let's say. So I'm not coding anymore, at least that much. But previously, for 25 years, I was a sysadmin, DevOps, lead DevOps, Scrum Master, many other things, delivery manager, solution architect. So, a lot of things I saw, which I don't want to see again. And yeah, I hope that today we will be able to not only discuss, but give you some good tips how to proceed with testing, with security, with all those stuff related to shift left, and not only shift left.
Absolutely. Paul, thank you so much. And you bring a wealth of knowledge and experience here. Well, yeah, sometimes I tell people, especially as I've gotten older, just living this long, you osmosis, you learn things. Let me introduce you to our second panel member. He joined us last week on another People's Skill Up sessions around testing, continuous testing. And that is Ad Sator. Ad, welcome. Tell people a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much. It's already prepared here for on the screen. Yes, I'm always use everything. I document a lot. So I'm senior solution architect at CMA-CGM, and I'm DevOps Institute member. I'm owning more than 52, now it's 54 IT certification for cloud, Kubernetes, many certification, Java, etc., Spring. I was CTO for 10 years and solution architect. I founded many companies and I went in bankruptcy. It's 4 companies. So I filed a lot and I managed more than 30 projects like that, and 20 consulting missions. And I delivered more technical than 80 technical training, and for now it's 13 seminars. That's all. And welcome everybody.
Welcome, and welcome, and thank you for preparing our slides that you had set up there. And I would just mention that we learned, you mentioned you had companies, some went into bankruptcy. So, I've always found in my career, you learn more sometimes from your failures than you do from your successes. And so just living through those things and is educational in and of itself. All right. Let's jump in, though, in how far left should continuous testing be shifted? I think in order to answer that question, though, we first have to recognize that not all testing is created equal, right? I mean, when we talk about we talk about continuous testing like it's a monolith, but in today's modern, software development factories, if you will, there's so many different kinds of testing, and some lend themselves to shifting left more than others, right? Let's talk about the different kinds of tests first, and then decide, okay, which one of these are better candidates to shift left, and then how far left. Paul, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to kick us off. How would you, I mean, for our audience out here today, how would you categorize the different kinds of testing that, that are going on?
Right. So this is a very good question, because having proper structure is very important, because it's easy to be in the place where you put all your tests in the last phase of development, and it's not only about how many errors you will have at that point, but how costly it will be, right?
Yeah.
So shift left is not only about moving some tests on the beginning of the process, but also about reducing costs.
Yeah.
So
and we should have. That's back to Odd's point about bankruptcy, success, failures, all this. If it's not going to make a difference in the bottom line, it's not going to make you faster, better, why do it?
Yes, that is true. So I think that most of us are familiar with this testing pyramid, right? So we have like very easy to do test, very cheap to execute tests on the beginning. Then we go up with more complex, more bigger tests, like not unit test, but integration test, end-to-end, a lot of other tests, right? And what we should do also is to put into this scope the security tests as well, right? On different levels. It can be even for the unit tests. We can have security testing for unit tests. What we shouldn't forget is infrastructure, because very often when we talk about testing, we think about application, about the code of the application, not about the infrastructure. And basically, the problem with infrastructure is, I always say that, for example, infrastructure as code is the fast, automated way to deliver hidden misconfiguration to all environments in the same time.
Yeah.
And this is the point where you need to go before you start, right? And it's maybe not exactly answer to your question, but I start to think in some point that we should shift this thinking about testing even further left. You mentioned on the beginning architecture. We should test our hypothesis for the architecture. We should, of course, this is different type of test, if I can name it test at all. But this also need to be validated at some point before we start work. And for having part of testing done in your coding tool which you use, it can be very simple, VS Code, starting and going to more complicated and sophisticated tooling. But you can have this testing suites there as well. And the point here is that your code, which is not necessarily good, will never hit the repository. And this is also important, right?
Yeah.
So generally, we can say that CI/CD starts when the code hit the repository, right? And this is the point where the testing already should be done, or already should be started. So, because what means if you have code in the repository, your CI/CD pipelines will be triggered, your different other elements will be triggered. So something will happen with this code already, right? So we want to avoid this.
Agreed. Odd. You made a comment that Paul was referring to GitOps, but what do you think, Odd? What are the different kinds of testing that our audiences are dealing with today, right? I mean, in my day, and we had unit testing, for instance, right? Security testing has become part of the mix now. Odd, what other kinds of testing do you think people need to be cognizant when we talk about this?
Okay. Thank you very much for these questions, and because it's a bit complicated, I prepared some slides for that. All we know that my answer is before starting and after finishing. So testing is before starting the project, and after finishing the project, it's still live in. I'm sorry. So all we know that for every project you have 4 phases. The first phase is specification. In specification, we do project planning, we design, we gather requirements, we analyze, we define things. Then we execute. It means we start to code. Most of the people focus the testing just here, but it's in all these phases, and we will see that. And also in the deployment, that means we put our code, we build it, we put it live. Then users start to use our platform or our products. And here we have also many kinds of testing. So let's start with the specification. So specification, in this stage, we do testing. We define the quality gate. We define the global testing strategy. It does mean the test policies for the company. The test high-level test plan for the project, and detailed test plan. So all what we know, almost of the people do, is just detailed test plan. It means unit testing, component testing, system testing. But we have a lot of testings that we can do in this phase and this subfields. Here, for example, we have a lot of compliance, like, for example, ISO 27000. We have compliance, for example, for HIPAA, if the product has a relationship with health, for example. That for financial data, we have a lot of compliance, and we should test against this compliance. We have also, we should define the type and the level of testing in this phase of specification. And here we should define the test usability testing, test EB, compliance testing, performance testing. It means for capacity management. For example, what's the maximum of the delay of request, what the maximum of amount of memory, etc. Security testing and end-to-end testing. And here also in this phase specification, we define what should be automated and what should be manual, and what the bench of tools that we should use. Then we go for the execution. And for the execution, we have, like, for the execution, we have, before starting code, we put the wood architecture of all kinds of testing. Let's say, for example, unit testing, integration testing. So before coding, we test, we code the test before the first line of code. This is during execution. We don't code, we code test. And then we see the test file, and then we write code here. Then we run it, then we factor. So if we see from the beginning, the test is always shifted left. And then we test also regarding DevOps Trinity, for example, testing by isolation, API testing, integration testing, we add chaos monkey, etc. Then we come to the deployment. Now I will deploy like in Kubernetes, I will deploy in the cloud, in the native cloud, I don't know, maybe in premise. So we test against this pattern. For example, I want, for example, do a canary testing. For example, I with my load balancing, if I have, for example, 5% of user here and it's work, I switch to the version 2. Or the opposite here, for example, I try, for example, for my pre-deployment staging, I will switch my user like by 10 user by 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'm doing testing to see if I stop and I switch back to staging. Here I'm doing testing also, what we call it usability testing. It does mean front-end testing, testing of a future in the end side of the user. And we collect this data by monitoring, and we make alarm. And if this doesn't fit for our quality gate, we switch back. And this also for future toggling. For example, we have 5 futures. For example, in Amazon, I'm trying to ship, and we have, for example, comments. And comment future, we see from the browser that it doesn't work. We see that by collecting, by testing. Then we toggle off. It does mean we switch off this component, but we keep the other component that works. And this the first.
I need to jump in here though, because
yeah,
a lot of these tests look like they're post-deployment tests, right? A/B testing, blue-green deployments, feature toggles, feature flags. Some people call it feature flags. But what we're looking for is, in terms of shifting left, I think, and Paolo, feel free to jump in. I think we're talking about moving testing earlier, pre-deployment,
yes,
as early in that CI/CD process, and even before the CI. I mean, there are some tools where testing is being performed as the developers doing the code, right? And
yes,
it's telling us that. Paul, I wanted to give Paul a chance to.
Yeah. This is very important point, because exactly what we see here on the screen is a very good representation of testing. However, this is happening after you deploy. It doesn't matter on which environment or during your deployment.
Almost shift right testing. Right?
Kind of.
No, it's left shift, because to come here, we should code this test of Canary. We should code this blue-green deployment policy testing. So it's left. It's always left.
Right. Okay. So let's say there's one step left, right? But we want to go more steps left now, right? Just like
I mean, there's a great one. We don't have their names, but participant 555 in the QA section, he wrote the following. Listen, shift left testing is analogous to stopping a rolling snowball at the earlier stage, where it's easier to stop because the snowball is slower and smaller, where at a later stage, the snowball is already bigger and faster, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the idea here, right, of what we want.
To go with this analogy is is there, right? It is a snowball, nothing else, not the rectangle or whatever, right, or box. And we want to see it on the beginning, because with every roll, it will be harder and harder to roll this snow box, right? And it's useless anyway, right? So as early as we will able to find out and recover from this problem, it is better, right? However, there are aspects which are very important to understand if we talk about shift left, moving things before deployments, etc., that it is, let's say, relatively easy to test in that way monoliths, right? You can just run it on your laptop and check if everything works. With microservices, it becomes harder and harder, right, to do this. That's why this idea of testing diamond appeared, right? So the most emphasis here is on the integration testing, not unit testing, right?
Yeah.
However, still, you are able to do those tests locally to some extent, anyway. But the point is that we need to understand, even before deployment, really, before merging, before interacting with the main repository where all of us collaborate, that what we wrote, it is true that 2 + 2 is 4, not 5, because it's better to catch it on that point, not on the end, right? And this 5 is not allow someone to just hack our whole infrastructure or our whole application. And this can be done at least when CI/CD starts, right? We have tools for it. We can create proper process. That's why, for example, for my case, the CI part is big one, right? It's not just like building the artifact and I'm done, right? And then CD just deploy this artifact. No, CI contains a lot of steps where I sometimes even repeat steps done by developers, not because I don't believe developers, because I don't, but just to have, for example, metrics, measurements, and other data which I need, but also to ensure that the quality is good enough. Right?
Yeah, but we should also mention, though, that the kinds of testing here and what Odd is talking about, right? The canary test, the A/B test, these feature flags, these create the feedback loops that are they're the bread and butter of DevOps, right? This is how we continuously iterate and continuously improve our code and our applications, by doing these kinds of tests. And they do bring it back left. But when we're talking about how far left, here for me, and Odd and Paul, I'm interested in your answers in this. For me, here's the real crux. Here's the real nitty-gritty of what we need to answer. It's how far left. Because the more left we do, the more we put on the developer's plate. And the developer already has a lot on their plate.
And they have another tools and approaches to learn because of that.
Exactly.
And they have no more time.
Exactly.
And that's the problem. Yeah. So generally, in the best scenario, what we would like to see is have as much as possible testing as on the coding level, right? Especially for the security, because here we can ask very simple question. If you are a client of your bank, all of us are, right? And you are able to easily hack this bank, but on the development account. It's not a big problem, right?
Yeah.
But ask yourself, do you want to have account in the bank where you exactly know what's going on dev? I'm not sure, right? So that's why the environment which are already deployed are not the best places to test very basic security stuff, for example. And this should be done earlier in the process, throughout CI/CD, throughout integration with your coding software, etc., etc. But yes, this put a lot of efforts and a lot of tension on development, because developer is a Python developer. He is not the security guy.
No.
Right? He is the Python developer. He is not necessarily.
He's not a security professional.
Yes, an infrastructure guy, right? So all of those aspects should be also tackled. And yes, we have tools, etc., etc. But also there is a movement right now. So shift left, also with shift down, or just shift down, right? So generally, what we want to achieve is to empower the development teams with proper tooling. So like a platform team for this, right? And it's quite interesting concept. I will not say that is only shift down. It should be still shift left. So what we need to do is to ensure that developers, of course, they need to have some knowledge for this. That's obvious, but this is for their good, really. But they shouldn't be focused only on that. That's why they should have the proper tooling, which can be easily integrated and easily used for them, right? So for example, if you use SonarQube in your pipeline, it's quite easy tool. So, and you see everything there. You don't need to go and understand every single aspect of your code and what is there. You don't need to check every single line and sign in during the code review. There is a tool which is able to do it for you. And you can integrate it even before you will do the merges, pull requests, etc., etc. So, so this is how I understand reasonably available shift left for people, right? Because as you said, this is exactly the truth. We have more and more and more and more things on our heads, and the quality of work will go down with more stuff which you need to think of. I hope this answers, at least partially.
Yeah, we have a question in the Q&A, and it goes, Paul and Odd, you both sort of spoke about this, but let's get a little specific and try to help our audience. What are the tools used for testing? And if we can name brand names or whatever, here's the good news. In testing for CI/CD and in DevOps, we're blessed to have many open source tools that you don't even have to pay for, though, there's probably commercial versions of the open source tools that are a little easier to use. But we have open source tools that are free. We have low cost tools, and there are other commercial products. But Paul, if you wouldn't mind, give our audience maybe a little flavor of what tools should we use for testing and in terms of a shift left environment.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love this principle. So generally, I always try to have in the pipelines couple of sets, really, of the test elements, right? So for example, if we talk about infrastructure as code, because this is the DevOps way, right? I always want to have some testing there, but not like simplified testing, because everyone can run, for example, for CloudFormation, validation, right? For Terraform, validate. That's easy. We can do it all the day through the CLI. But the point is to check if the quality of our templates is proper. So we have TFSec, we have TerraTest, we have couple other tools like Chekhov, which are allowing us to test the quality and the security of the templates, right? And this is like must-have for infrastructure. For the application code, I always try to have SonarQube or something similar to SonarQube in the pipeline, because with this tool, I am able to control the quality of the code. I am also able, not only from the security and the, let's say, language quality perspective, but also from the perspective of the work needed in the future to rework the stuff, to rewrite the things. So every aspect of this thread, let's say, is also there. For unit testing, we have multiple tools. For every single language, it is different one. But the point for me is that every single testing tool I use creates an artifact for my pipeline, which is the report from it. And there is a metric built on it. So honestly speaking, in fact, it doesn't matter what tool you will use. What matters, start using them and start measure the results, right? Then you will see, for example, this tool is not best. I need something specific, right? Another tooling what I have in mind is, for example, for containers, right? We have different checks for example, from SNCC. So the quality and the security of the container image, not the application run on it, but the container image itself. This is also very important, right? So we need to do tests on different levels, really, starting from networking, because this is also important layer, through the infrastructure, through the application, through the connectivity. So these integration tests generally are written by QAs, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we can talk a lot about this. So I try to find a stop point.
No. So I feel like we haven't given you enough of a chance though here. What do you think?
Me, I will go back always to my slides.
Okay.
Okay, so for me, the tool not define me, because I'm against what we call it mini-width tickets anti-pattern. Like, for example, today we start to talk about testing GPT, testing IO, etc. I'm not fan of this. I'm fan to have to understand what the client want or what I want to achieve. And what I want to achieve, for example, here we call it CI. This is continuous deployment, and this is continuous delivery. The problem that all people are focusing here in just unit testing and integration testing, but we could have like the best tool for unit testing. Like I will bring you the list of all tools we can use, and I can have the best integration. But when I run it, it doesn't work. For example, for Internet Explorer, for someone, I should know it. And all this kind of testing should be defined and deployed and done before. So it should be done here, and the tools should be done in the specification, because it has a relationship with the budget. And for me, there is no best pipeline. And I try to show you some tools. For example, HubSpot, it's using these stacks. For example, for unit testing, because they are using like Mocha.js, Simple Test, etc. Because they are using PHP and JS. For performance testing, this is what they are using. For automation testing, with Selenium, with Tosca, this is for controlling incidents, etc. And this what they are using. But if we go and want to see the big picture here, that we have a lot of tools for collaboration. I'm sorry, you have Visual Studio, you have Trello, you have Asana, you have Jira. For build, we have a lot. For testing, so I will not let these tools use me. I will use these tools. And to use these tools, you should know what's your limit and what you want to test, and what's its importance, and what's the risk you have in your system. If you have monolithic, you don't have to use, for example, to test internet, to test infrastructure, to test anything. But if you have distributed, today we have distributed a component in the internet. It means in the cloud, and in containers and on-premise. So that means you should master all kind of testing before choosing the tool. And also for pipelines, if you want to see many, for example of pipeline according to Shannon leads, and we find it like here, for example, we use check marks, and check marks is for we call it security testing, shift left just unit testing. We use check marks. They use Splink. This is for distributed tracing, for log collection, etc., and it uses Gentlet, and this is for scanning and testing artifact, and testing what we call it SAST and DUST, static testing and dynamic testing. If we go, for example, for CloudBees is the founder of Jenkins. Jenkins themselves, they use this pipeline, for example. The initialize build, they build, and then it starts analysis here. With Helm, they start doing tests and test deployment with Kubernetes. They do analysis security testing. They do artifact testing. They deploy to KA, and therefore they test also. And this is end-to-end testing. And all this, they track it by Slack and by Sonar type Nexus index. And if we go, for example, to have the big picture, is this the big picture we should be aware of? While designing, you have some tests to do. While the development, we have some tests to do here. And for managing a repository, you have some tests to do here. And you are CI/CD and post-deployment. So because you have the documents, I will let you like to check this. Because we have runtime application self-protection testing, container and infrastructure security testing, as Paul mentioned, and mobile testing, interactive testing, dynamic testing, etc. And all what we know about SonarCube is just static testing. It's just a 1% of tests that we should do. Here I left also some DevSecOps testing tools, and the most used. And to check all landscape for testing, I will give you this website, this line. Everybody know it. It's the landscape of Cloud Native Foundry. If you go there, we'll find all continuous integration testing delivery tools with the maturity and how many people use it, and it uses it in which stack, in which company, and what's the drawbacks, etc. I recommend you to give it a deep dive, and you will find your right tools there, because all the tools are here in this page.
Excellent. And again, let me just remind you all that you could download all of the slides Odd has in the handout section of the communication panel, which is on the right-hand side of your browser. So please do that. You know what, Paul, I have a quick question for you from the audience in Q&A. Participant 760 wrote, guys, I'd like to know how to connect all of these interesting topics with clean code. Odd, I see you're writing maybe an answer in, but Paul, connect the dots for us if you don't mind.
Yeah. Hopefully you don't mean also clean architecture, because this is completely different topic. But anyway, clean code is also part of the proper approach to your whole SDLC, right? So how you code, how you cope with documentation, how you do all of these elements, which first of all, your code will be reusable and able to be read by someone else, maintained by someone else, etc., etc. So we are limiting the bus factor, honestly speaking. What is bus factor? Think if you will be hit in your company, is there anyone else who can do what you are doing right now, simply speaking. And now, with some tools, I already mentioned SonarCube. SonarCube can help you with clean code. To some extent, of course, because you have your own rules, you have your own practices, how you code, etc., 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 right? And this is also part of what I said on the beginning, some hypothesis on the beginning of the project, beginning of the work, because you set some rules for yourself, how you will test those rules. Okay, you agreed in your team that you will use this specific approach to name your variables. How you will enforce this, right? So having, let's say, stupid ideas for how you will work, which are not testable at all, is useless, right? And now, having this information from tools like SonarCube and many, many more, that you need to rework this part, that part, etc., 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 because you have, for example, too many arguments, too many variables, too many of something, right? This is also for the readability, for this make the code cleaner. So developers themselves can run those tools and do the checking for themselves. But we should have this also in the pipelines, because we need to remember one thing. I said from some time that pipeline is a stupid thing. Pipeline doesn't understand what's going on before, what's going on after, what is around. It's simple. I mean, CI/CD pipeline. It's simple creature who takes something and put it somewhere else, maybe with some manipulation inside. But there is a whole process which contains those pipelines, and run those pipelines constantly, right? Continuously. So we need to understand how those pipelines perform, generally speaking. So we need to have metrics. We need to have data from this Sonar Cube, which I mentioned so many times already, from the execution of the pipeline, for failures, from unit tests, etc., 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 and observe the trend, observe the quality, observe the way how we as team, as company perform. That's why I said, and I think you confirmed this, it's not about the tools themselves. Of course, tools are important, but it's more about the process. We need to understand what we want to build, how we want to put those blocks, and where in this whole process, and then tools will just jump in, honestly.
Yep, I get it. Just like making sure we've answered all the questions here. So I wanted to return to the developer's role in all this, right? I've never met a developer who raised his hands and said, I want to write crappy code, right? I don't want high quality. I want low quality. No, developers take pride in what they develop and the code they write. But how do we get them to embrace shift left, right? When it's making more work for them, when it's putting more on their already crowded plate. What can we do that'll let them embrace this?
So that's why I'm saying that IT has become a people business, not just technical business, because it's about the mindset, it's about the understanding and having ownership of things we are doing, but not in the way that you wrote it, you run it, but you feel responsible for what you do, and you have proper tools and proper learning path for it, because it's very often that some specific approach is very easy to use, and honestly we want to have like 1 or 2 or 3 commands from the whole big framework, but the entry point to this framework is very high. So we need to have someone who will teach us how to use it. So the proper knowledge sharing, the proper ownership, the and maybe not enforcing, but kind of emphasizing the ownership, right? For everything what you do. Proper communication between teams. That is where it starts, really. Okay? Because if you feel that you have ownership on something, you will be more willing. And I know that how it sounds, but you will be more willing to go deeper. Because as you said, Alan, you feel pride from it, right?
Agreed. Odd thoughts on that?
Yeah, yes,
a lot coming in, but go ahead.
Yes, I try to save time. Yeah. So for example, first of things, we use what we call it Wilbert's quadrants. If you try to type it like in Google Image, you will find like I don't know if I'm able to upload picture now. I'm not upload. So you'll find that we have internal, external. We have like 4 kind model that recognize the human approach. The first one is consciousness, behavior, system, and culture. And there is a lot of pattern of change management that use Wilbert's quadrants to adopt testing, to adopt DevOps, etc. The second one is B-shaped and multi-shaped model knowledge. We will not say anymore developer, we will say engineer. So you are engineer, you are web engineer. So that means you are not just coding. It does mean you are engineer, so you are responsible as well as the tester and operations people for the system. So you will be in all ceremonies of agile ceremonies, and you will have other features than you are used to have. So that means that will scale you to not have mono shape, like just coders, but coder with test, or coder with operations, coder with cloud. And here we will build like a homogeneous team that can do many stuff. And this is the principle of Scrum or Agile in general. We don't have role. We have just task. The second one is Dojo Consortium. It's come from Toyota. It's come from also from Ikigai principle. So we should have Dojo Consortium. So Dojo Consortium, it's like you go to base camp and you do the same things until you master it. And for the Dojo Consortium, you can have, like, for example, for every week, someone will come and, like, we can, like, for example, suggest, for example, to have 4 hours or 2 hours a week, and someone from the team, anybody comes to show us principle that, and he worked in this principle, for example, for testing, and he will show us how he do it, and we will implement it. And for the second week, another person, for example, for security testing, another one for smoke testing, and I will involve all the team in this dojo. So everybody is the teacher and is the student. Also, we can do it by using Lean. It means VSM, value stream mapping. So when I see my system drafted like component, I know what is the leak, I know what is the WASP, I know when it's not very tested, it's not very coded. I should see this. So we are scientists. So we are based in numbers. So I should see numbers. And this we can do it like with portfolio management, with Jira, for example. And we see, for example, for testing, I tested this. But for defects, we just, for example, advance with 20% by week by correcting bugs, for example. When I see all this, I can use the Lean management for Toyota with Six Sigma, or just Lean with VSM for DevOps. And also the 4C, and the 4C, it's like the same for Wilbert's quadrants. It's the culture, it's the consumer, is the connection, etc.
You know, I would like to be a devil's advocate here for a second, because you know, and I understand the point where we stand with saying we are engineers, right? But still, if you are engineering in the factory which makes nails, you probably will be not the best engineer for space program, right? And the same we have here. So we started with I shape, then we have T shape, right? Right now we talk about X shape. I wonder, and I'm afraid that tomorrow we will need to be octopus shape, and more and more and more, right? So, and still this thing here in between those bones here is the same. It's not changing.
The bias, cognitive bias, yeah.
And the problem is that expecting more and more and more without proper tooling, proper shaping the team and its responsibility and its ownership leads to, well, I'll be honest, to leaving the company.
Hey guys, we're almost out of time. And it took all this time, but we finally, I was wondering when someone was going to ask this, because with AI being such a generative AI is such a topic that I see Odd is already typing on it. Is there any specialized testing tool that's using generative AI besides ChatGPT or Bard, which are very, this is like, being in the ocean looking for a rowboat. But is there any generative AI or any of the testing tools that are incorporating generative AI that, to make testing or shift left testing a little easier? Odd or Paul, do you know of any? Or autopilot, I see Odd wrote, you want to talk about that?
No, you can go first. And what I wanted to say that all the classical tools that we are using, for example, unit testing, Cucumber, anything like Tricentis, for example, also joined the buzz and they implemented intelligence artificial for testing. So all classical tools that we are using now, they are like in this buzz, and they have implemented like ways, like our conversation before starting this webinar, Stack Overflow, for example. So now even any code editor is doing it. Any tools coding, like even Java, even Java Unit, even Cucumber, they are doing also automation, like and pattern matching testing generator. Yes.
But still, do you see any improvement in your work with that? Real improvement, not just fancy stuff that you have auto completion.
And this is the problem. This is the role of testing is the productivity. We should measure the productivity. If I'm using this tool just for buzz, I will not use it. I should use Yagni. If I'm not using, if I don't need some things, I should not use it. It's a waste of time, money, and it will not let me focus. It will the opposite. I will just use bunch of tools with them problems. So I should focus in how I want to do things and the learning behavior. I should always have feedbacks from. For example, there are many big companies that generate many billion of euros, and they are not doing, for example, integration testing. So if we, for example, they are doing directly system testing and toggling. So
the issue here is the same like with tests we have already, right? We have platforms for doing integration tests, automated tests, etc., etc. But if you want to have your application tested, really, you need to write the tests exactly for your use case.
Yes.
And the same is here. We can have tools which are loaded with full of AI, etc., etc. And when the computer from enterprise is like a child, right? But as long as the model on which this AI is, taught is not exactly the model you need to use in your own environment, it can be kind of helpful, but it's useless, really, because you will have like tons of false positives there, which may be valid, but you need time to explore those, right? So as long as we will not have tools for our specific case with AI, I'm not expecting this will be that great change for now.
We will have true negative.
Sorry,
guys, I need to jump in. We're at the top of the hour. Hey, before we end things though, Cody, our back end host here, has put a link to a survey that we'd like for you to fill out, letting us know what you thought of today's webinar, what you'd like to see in future webinars, etc. So please take a moment to fill out our survey. Powell Odd, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
For a lively discussion, right? The hour went quick with this discussion. It's an interesting topic.
Time is relative.
Time is relative. That's Einstein said. Okay. We're going to jump out. I want to thank everyone for attending. Many thanks to our partners at PeopleCert and DevOps Institute, the PeopleCert company, for partnering with us on these Skill Up sessions. Until next time, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.